The Sunday dinner table was crowded with my family, laughter bouncing off the walls as plates clinked and conversations overlapped. I gripped my fork tightly, my heart hammering against my ribs as I waited for the right moment to speak. Finally, during a brief pause in the noise, I cleared my throat and announced, "I'm quitting my accounting job to start my own event design company." The words hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds before my father Garrick burst out laughing so hard he choked on his drink. My mother Leona didn't even look up from her plate as she muttered coldly, "You can't even manage your own laundry, Novely. How exactly do you plan to run a business?" My older sister Talia smirked from across the table, her phone already in her hand, pointed directly at me. "You can't even organize your own life," she said mockingly, "let alone a company." I felt my face flush hot with humiliation, tears burning behind my eyes as the camera lingered on my trembling hands. My name is Novely Hart, and that was the night my family declared war on me. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing nonstop with notifications. Talia had posted the video from dinner with the caption, "My sister thinks she's a CEO now," face with tears of joy. The video had already gotten hundreds of comments overnight, strangers calling me delusional, locals from our town laughing at my expense, people I'd never met sharing it with crying laughing emojis. My stomach twisted into knots as I scrolled through the cruelty. At work, my coworkers whispered in the break room, their eyes darting away when I entered. Someone had clearly shared the video around the office. During lunch, I sat at my desk staring at the spreadsheet on my screen, but the numbers blurred together through my tears. Finally, I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked out of that accounting firm without looking back. No backup plan existed, no safety net waited for me. Just a worn notebook full of event sketches and a name I'd been dreaming about for months, Lunavale Designs. The humiliation burned, but beneath it, something harder began forming like steel. I needed workspace immediately, somewhere to store supplies and meet potential clients professionally. My parents had an old shed behind their house that they barely used, filled with forgotten storage boxes and dusty furniture. I spent 2 days cleaning it out, scrubbing floors and painting walls white, imagining how I'd arrange a small desk and display boards. I was hanging curtains when Leona appeared in the doorway, arms crossed with that familiar look of cold disapproval. "We need that space for storage," she said flatly, not even pretending to care about my efforts. "You have 1 week to move your things out." My hands froze on the curtain rod. Talia appeared behind her, leaning against the doorframe with false concern. "Maybe try getting a real job again," she suggested sweetly, her voice dripping with condescension. That night, I loaded everything into my car and drove to an empty parking lot. I reclined the driver's seat and tried to sleep, my breath fogging the windows. I whispered into the darkness, "I'll never ask them for help again." The next morning, I drove to my cousin Soren's small cafe on the edge of town, desperate for coffee and Wi-Fi. Soren had always been the quiet one at family gatherings, more interested in books than drama. I found an empty corner table and opened my laptop, beginning to design event flyers with shaking hands. After an hour, Soren appeared with a fresh coffee I hadn't ordered. "You look like you're working on something important," he observed quietly, setting down the cup. I explained everything, the video, the humiliation, my parents evicting me from the shed, sleeping in my car. He listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. Then he said something that changed everything. "Use the corner by the window. Set up your studio there. No rent for the first 3 months." I stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do that?" He shrugged simply. "Because someone needs to believe in you first." That afternoon, my first real client walked through the cafe door by accident, saw my designs spread across the table, and hired me on the spot for her daughter's baby shower. The baby shower was supposed to be my breakthrough moment, my chance to prove everyone wrong with a flawless first event. Instead, everything went catastrophically wrong from the first hour. The cake I'd ordered arrived completely melted because the bakery's refrigeration had failed overnight. The Daker boxes were delayed by 3 hours due to a delivery truck breakdown. The venue's air conditioning stopped working in the middle of summer heat. The client's mother screamed at me in front of 50 guests, her face red with fury. "This is completely unprofessional. You've ruined everything." And then, as if the universe wanted to torture me further, Talia appeared. She'd somehow found out about the event and showed up with her phone camera ready, filming my absolute failure for another viral video. She narrated loudly, "Day one of my sister's company, everyone." That night, I sat in Soren's cafe after everyone left, seriously considering quitting before I'd really started. Soren sat across from me and said quietly, "They're laughing because you scare them, Novely. You're doing something they never had the courage to try." 2 weeks later, my ex-boyfriend Maxton called unexpectedly, asking to meet for coffee. We dated for 3 years before breaking up 6 months ago when he said I wasn't ambitious enough for his future plans. Now suddenly he wanted to talk and catch up. I agreed cautiously, hoping maybe he'd become supportive of my new direction. We met at a downtown coffee shop, and he seemed genuinely interested as I explained Lunavale Designs, my vision for heartfelt events, my struggles and small victories. He took notes, asked detailed questions, seemed impressed by my business plan. I felt hopeful leaving that meeting, thinking maybe I'd been wrong about him. Then, 2 weeks later, I discovered the truth. Maxton had taken everything I'd shared, my business model, my company name, my entire concept, and pitched it to my father as his own idea, promising to make it professional if Garrick invested. My father gave him $50,000. When I confronted Maxton outside his apartment, he looked at me coldly and said, "Business is business, Nova. You were never going to pull it off anyway." The betrayal broke something inside me that hadn't already been shattered. I threw myself into work with desperate intensity, accepting every small job I could find: birthday parties, retirement celebrations, anniversary dinners. I worked 20-hour days, surviving on coffee and determination. Then came the charity gala that was supposed to be my biggest opportunity yet. I spent 3 days setting up an elaborate venue with donated decorations and borrowed equipment. The morning of the event, the organizers canceled due to insufficient ticket sales. I collapsed right there in the empty venue, my body simply giving up from exhaustion. An ambulance took me to the hospital, where doctors said I was severely dehydrated and sleep-deprived. My mother visited once, standing at the foot of my hospital bed looking annoyed rather than concerned. "You're always so dramatic, Novely," she sighed, "chasing fairy tales like a child." Later, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway, telling relatives loudly, "She's in the hospital because she refuses to accept reality. Some people just can't handle real life." I stared at the ceiling, tears sliding silently down my temples. While recovering at home, which was still mostly my car and occasional nights on Soren's couch, I received an unexpected direct message on social media. A woman named Kaya explained that Talia had been hired to organize her wedding, but had done such a terrible job that the event was a disaster. "I saw your story online," Kaya wrote. "The real one, not the mocking videos. I believe in second chances, and I think you deserve one." She offered to pay me double my normal rate if I could fix and redesign her vow renewal ceremony in 2 weeks. It was impossible timing, but I said yes anyway. I worked day and night, pouring everything I'd learned from my failures into creating something beautiful. The ceremony was held in a garden at sunset, with handmade decorations and personal touches that made Kaya cry happy tears. She recorded a video testimonial thanking me, talking about my dedication and talent. That video went viral too, but this time the comments were supportive. "This is the girl from that family video. She's incredible." People started seeing me differently, and more importantly, I started seeing myself differently too. Suddenly, my inbox exploded with messages from potential clients. Local brides who'd seen Kaya's testimonial wanted to book consultations. Small business owners needed help with launch parties. Families reached out about anniversary celebrations and milestone birthdays. For the first time since starting Lunavale Designs, I actually had to turn down work because I couldn't physically handle the volume. I hired my first assistant, a college student named Bryn who needed portfolio experience. Then Talia called, her voice sharp with accusation. "You're stealing my clients," she hissed. "People who were supposed to hire me are going to you instead. What did you tell them about me?" I kept my voice calm and professional. "I didn't tell them anything, Talia. They came to me on their own." She hung up without another word. That night, Soren and I celebrated with cheap champagne in his cafe after closing. "You're actually doing it," he said with genuine pride. "You're actually building something real." I smiled, feeling for the first time like maybe I really could succeed despite everything working against me. The local wedding expo was my chance to establish Lunavale Designs as a legitimate business in the community. I'd paid for a booth, prepared sample albums, ordered professional banners, and spent weeks designing the perfect display. I arrived 2 hours early to set up, but when I reached my assigned booth space, my stomach dropped. The banners were gone, my sample albums had disappeared, and my display materials were nowhere to be found. I immediately found security and demanded to see surveillance footage. The guard reluctantly showed me grainy video of 2 people walking past my booth the night before, Maxton and Talia, clear as day, carrying my materials away. My hands shook with rage and despair. I had 1 hour before the expo opened to hundreds of potential clients. Instead of giving up, I drove to a nearby office supply store, bought poster board and markers, and rebuilt my entire booth from scratch in 45 minutes. When the doors opened, I stood there with handmade signs and a genuine smile. People noticed my determination, the story spreading quickly through the crowded hall. By day's end, I'd booked 12 new clients. The crowd actually applauded when someone recognized me as the girl from that video who never gave up. My success clearly bothered my family more than my failure ever had. Within a month of the expo, Talia and Maxton announced their partnership launching Heart House Events, funded entirely by my parents' investment money. They posted glossy photos on social media, their marketing emphasizing luxury and sophistication, with captions that subtly mocked Lunavale as the discount brand for people on tight budgets. Their office was downtown in an expensive building, their equipment was top of the line, and their promotional materials looked professionally designed by expensive agencies. Meanwhile, I was still working out of Soren's cafe corner with second-hand equipment and handmade decorations. The comparison seemed obvious. They had money and connections, while I had nothing but determination. But I noticed something they'd overlooked in their rush to outshine me. Their work was flashy but soulless, beautiful but impersonal. Within weeks, clients began complaining online that Heart House Events was cold and corporate, that their celebrations felt like generic productions rather than meaningful moments. My phone kept ringing with new bookings from people who wanted heart over glamour. I was winning the war they didn't even realize we were fighting. The family group chat had always been active with updates and photos, casual conversations and holiday planning. I'd stayed in it despite everything, some part of me still hopping for reconciliation or at least acknowledgement. Then one morning, my aunt forwarded me a screenshot that made my blood run cold. It was from a private conversation between family members that I wasn't included in, discussing me like I was a problem to be solved. "Let her run out of steam," Leona had written. "She's not built for this kind of pressure. Give it 6 months and she'll come crawling back begging for help." Garrick had replied, "The girl has always been weak. This fantasy will collapse soon enough." Others had agreed, adding their own dismissive comments about my capabilities and character. I stared at those words for a long time, feeling something inside me finally break free from the need for their approval. I quietly left the family group chat, blocked their numbers one by one, and deleted their contacts from my phone. If they wanted to watch me fail, they could do it from a distance. I was done performing for their judgment. Financial pressure was crushing me slowly despite the increasing client bookings. Equipment costs, supply expenses, marketing fees, everything added up faster than my income could cover. I was meeting with Bryn to review accounts when she mentioned casually that Soren had been making extra loan payments at the bank. Confused. I asked him about it directly that evening after the cafe closed. He hesitated, clearly not wanting to tell me, but finally admitted the truth. He'd taken out a small business loan in his own name to help me buy better equipment months ago, the photography lights, the quality fabric samples, the computer software I'd been using. "Why would you risk that for me?" I asked, my voice breaking as tears streamed down my face. "You could lose everything if I fail." Soren looked at me steadily with kind eyes. "Because someone had to believe in you first, Novely. Your family should have been that someone, but they weren't, so I decided I would be." That night, I made a promise to myself that I'd pay him back every cent with interest, and that I'd never forget who stood beside me when everyone else walked away. Everything changed the day Celeste Morrow's assistant called my phone. Celeste was a celebrity lifestyle influencer with millions of followers, known for her elaborate parties and aesthetic perfectionism. Her assistant explained that Celeste had seen my viral transformation story, from the mocking family video to Kaya's glowing testimonial, and was moved by my resilience and artistic vision. She wanted to hire Lunavale Designs for her upcoming engagement party. The budget was larger than everything I'd made in the past year combined. I said yes before fully processing what was happening. The event was a dream come true, a garden venue transformed into an enchanted forest, with thousands of fairy lights and handmade decorations that took weeks to prepare. Celeste posted dozens of photos and videos, tagging my company and praising my work effusively. Her millions of followers discovered Lunavale overnight. My phone didn't stop ringing for 3 days straight. Sponsors reached out offering partnerships. Event venues contacted me about preferred vendor arrangements. I hired 2 more assistants immediately just to handle the incoming requests. For the first time, I actually felt like a real business owner rather than someone pretending and hoping nobody noticed. Success brought new enemies I hadn't anticipated or prepared for properly. 3 of my regular suppliers suddenly canceled our contracts without clear explanation, leaving me scrambling before major events. One supplier finally admitted the truth off the record. Talia had approached them offering cash payments to drop me as a client, trying to sabotage my growing reputation. My new assistants panicked, worried we'd have to cancel bookings and refund deposits, destroying everything we'd built. But I refused to let her win through underhanded tactics. I went to each supplier's office personally, presenting printed evidence of Talia's bribery attempts, showing my consistent payment history and professional conduct, explaining how her interference was actually illegal business interference. One owner, an older woman named Francine, looked at me with newfound respect. "Most people would have just complained or given up," she said. "You came prepared with facts and professionalism. That tells me everything about your character versus hers." All 3 suppliers agreed to honor our contracts and actually offered discounted rates for my trouble. Talia's sabotage had backfired completely, strengthening my business relationships instead of destroying them. The silent victories felt sweeter than any loud triumph could have been. When Talia's company lost a high-profile client to Lunavale, a corporate anniversary gala worth tens of thousands, she called my phone screaming. "You stole my business," she shrieked, her voice shrill with fury and desperation. "That client was mine. What lies did you tell them about me?" I could have yelled back, could have listed every cruel thing she'd done, every time she'd tried to destroy me. Instead, I responded softly with absolute calm. "No, Talia, I didn't steal anything, I earned it." Then I hung up before she could respond, blocking her number immediately afterward. The quiet power in that moment felt incredible, refusing to engage with her drama, refusing to defend myself against baseless accusations, simply stating truth and walking away. That evening, Bryn asked if I was worried about Talia retaliating further. I shook my head with genuine peace. "She's fighting me because she's losing. People who are winning don't need to sabotage others." My confidence wasn't arrogance anymore. It was earned through survival and success despite impossible odds. The collapse of my family's finances happened gradually, then suddenly all at once. Rumors started spreading through our town's business community about Maxton embezzling funds from various investments, including my father's money in Hart House events. I heard whispers at networking events, saw vague posts on local business forums. Then the news broke publicly. Maxton had been arrested for fraud, having stolen over $200,000 from multiple investors, including a significant portion of Garrick's savings. My parents' carefully constructed financial empire began crumbling as other investments tied to Maxton's schemes unraveled. Their house went into foreclosure. Garrick's reputation in the business community was destroyed by association. Talia posted increasingly desperate and vague sad quotes on social media, lyrics about betrayal and hardship, photos of herself looking contemplatively at sunsets. I saw every post because mutual friends kept sharing them with commentary. I didn't gloat or celebrate their downfall publicly. I didn't post anything vindictive or make any statements about karma or justice. I simply focused on my own growing success, knowing that the storm I'd survived was now consuming the people who tried to drown me in it. My phone rang late one Tuesday evening, displaying a number I'd blocked months ago but somehow still recognized. Leona. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether to answer or let it go to voicemail. Curiosity won. "Hello," I answered cautiously. There was a long pause before she spoke, and when she did, her voice sounded smaller and older than I'd ever heard it. "Novely," she began, the word heavy with unspoken meaning. We're losing the house." Another pause. "Your father's investments are gone. Everything's falling apart." I stayed silent, waiting. "Can you talk to your father?" she asked, the request heavy with humiliation she was trying to hide. "Maybe help him understand what to do next." Years ago, I would have immediately offered help, desperate for their approval even as they destroyed me. Now I remembered every cruel word, every mocking video, every time they'd chosen Talia over me. "You taught me not to mix family and business," I said quietly, repeating Leona's own words back to her. Then I ended the call gently but firmly. I wasn't cruel, wasn't vindictive. I was simply done carrying people who tried to bury me. The mayor's office reached out through official channels, their assistant calling to schedule a meeting about a prestigious opportunity. The city wanted to host a major cultural gala celebrating local artists and businesses, the biggest community event in 5 years. They'd reviewed multiple event companies, and after seeing Lunavale's portfolio and reputation for meaningful, heartfelt celebrations, they wanted me to handle everything. The venue was the Grand Hall downtown, the same elegant space where my parents had once hosted a charity dinner and specifically told the venue manager to never rent to me if I asked. "You'll just embarrass yourself and waste their time," Garrick had told the manager directly. Now I was being hired by the city itself to produce their most important event in that exact location. The irony was almost too perfect. I accepted immediately, already envisioning how I'd transform the space into something beautiful and memorable. This wasn't just another job. It was validation from the entire community, official recognition that I'd become exactly what my family said I could never be. Professional, successful, respected, and most importantly, completely independent of their approval or support. The night of the cultural gala arrived with perfect weather and hundreds of attendees. I'd worked for 6 weeks on every detail: decorations celebrating local artists, food from small family restaurants, performances by community musicians. The Grand Hall glowed with warm lighting and careful artistry, every corner reflecting the heart I poured into meaningful events rather than flashy displays. As the program began, I stood near the back managing final details when I spotted them. My family, Leona, Garrick, and Talia, sitting in the back row, watching silently. They'd somehow gotten tickets despite everything. My name flashed across the projection screen in elegant script. "Produced by Lunavale Designs, Novely Hart, founder." The mayor spoke about the event's beauty and the company that had made it possible. Applause filled the hall, waves of appreciation and recognition. I watched my family's faces from across the room, Garrick looking stunned, Leona appearing small and diminished, Talia staring with an expression I couldn't quite read. The applause seemed to drown out every cruel word they'd ever said, every laugh at my expense, every prediction of my failure. I smiled quietly to myself, standing in the success they'd sworn would never come. Within 3 months of the gala's success, Hart House Events filed for bankruptcy. The news spread quickly through business channels and social media. Talia's company had accumulated massive debt from expensive overhead costs, lost clients due to poor service, and couldn't recover from the association with Maxton's fraud. Rumors swirled online that Talia was publicly blaming me for stealing her spotlight and turning the community against her. I saw her once outside the courthouse where the bankruptcy proceedings were held. She sat alone on the steps, crying quietly into her hands, looking genuinely broken and defeated. Years ago, I might have felt vindictive satisfaction at seeing her suffer. Now I felt only a strange, distant sadness for what could have been if we'd supported each other instead of competing. I walked past quietly without saying anything, without gloating or offering false sympathy. Just peace. Her pain wasn't my responsibility to fix, and her failures weren't my victories to celebrate. I'd built my success independently of her downfall. They just happened to occur simultaneously because life has its own timing for justice and consequences. Several weeks passed in blessed quiet as my business continued growing steadily. Then one afternoon, my receptionist buzzed my office with a strange tone in her voice. "You have visitors," she said carefully. "They say they're family." My stomach tightened immediately, knowing exactly who it was before asking. I walked out to the bright, modern reception area I'd recently moved into, a professional space that finally reflected my success. Yona, Garrick, and Talia stood awkwardly near the entrance, looking diminished somehow in a way that had nothing to do with physical appearance and everything to do with presence. They'd lost that commanding arrogance I remembered from every family gathering. "Novely," Leona began, her voice careful and measured. "We were hoping we could talk privately." I gestured toward a small conference room, and they followed silently. Once the door closed, the real purpose emerged quickly. "We're hoping you might have something." "Open," Leona said, her eyes darting nervously around the successful space. "Talia needs work. Your father and I could help with business development." They wanted jobs. They actually came to me begging for employment after everything they'd done, everything they'd said. I looked around at my thriving business, the result of survival, persistence, and refusing to let their cruelty define me. "We're not hearing," I answered softly but firmly. "But I genuinely wish you the best." They left in complete silence. After they departed, Bryn appeared in my doorway looking curious and slightly concerned. "Was that your family?" she asked hesitantly, having heard stories but never meeting them personally. I nodded slowly, still processing the surreal encounter. "The ones from the videos, the ones who said you'd never make it." I smiled at the irony. "Yes, they used to call me delusional for believing in myself." Bryn shook her head in amazement. "Looks like you were just early." Her words captured everything perfectly. I hadn't been delusional. I'd simply seen possibilities they couldn't imagine because they were too focused on maintaining their own superiority to recognize real potential. That evening, I reviewed my company's growth metrics. Hundreds of satisfied clients, dozens of positive reviews, partnerships with major venues, sponsorships from established brands, and a team of talented people who believed in heartfelt celebration over empty glamour. Luna Vale Designs had become exactly what I'd envisioned that night in my car when everything seemed impossible. A business built on genuine connection, artistic integrity, and treating every event like it mattered. My family's rejection hadn't destroyed me. Somehow, impossibly, it had freed me to become stronger than I'd ever been under their shadow. 6 months later, I hosted a charity gala supporting women entrepreneurs starting small businesses. The event raised over $50,000 while providing networking opportunities and resources for women facing the same obstacles I'd overcome. Local reporters attended, and several asked if I planned to mention my family during my speech. I thought carefully about how to answer, about vindictiveness versus grace, about revenge versus healing. Finally, I simply said, "The people who doubted me built my drive." I owe them nothing but gratitude for showing me exactly who I didn't want to become. That wasn't entirely true. I didn't feel grateful for their cruelty. But I'd learned that real revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about building something so beautiful and successful that their opinions became irrelevant noise in the background of my life. The gala received extensive media coverage, with several articles specifically highlighting my journey from humiliation to success. Young women reached out thanking me for inspiring them to pursue their own dreams despite family opposition. I realized my story had become bigger than personal vindication. It had become encouragement for others facing similar battles. That realization felt more valuable than any revenge could have been. The story ends where it began, but everything was different now. I sat at a dinner table surrounded by people, but this time it was my team and chosen family. Bryn, Soren, my other assistants, close friends I'd made through my business journey. We celebrated another successful quarter with laughter and genuine joy, the kind of warmth and acceptance I'd once desperately sought from blood relatives who couldn't provide it. I raised my glass for a toast, and the table quieted expectantly. "To every no that turned into my next chapter," I said, my voice steady and genuinely happy. "To everyone who believed in me when belief was scarce, and to building peace instead of chasing approval from people who were never going to give it." Laughter filled the room as glasses clinked together, conversations resuming in comfortable chaos. My phone buzzed with a text notification, an unread message from Talia that simply said, "I'm proud of you." I glanced at it briefly, then set my phone down without replying. Maybe someday I'd respond, maybe I wouldn't. Either way, my peace didn't depend on her acknowledgement anymore. I looked around the table at faces reflecting genuine care and celebration and smiled. This was real family, chosen, earned, and infinitely more valuable than the one I'd been born into. This was real success, built on integrity, perseverance, and the courage to bet on myself when nobody else would. They'd laughed when I said I'd start my own company. Now they asked me for jobs, but the real victory wasn't their defeat, it was my freedom.